Hey guys, it's John from That DIY Couple. Today I want to talk about the 4 things that I wish I knew before becoming an entrepreneur, a little bit about my journey to become an entrepreneur, and some general ideas about getting started and working for yourself. So, to give you guys a little bit of a background, I have a pretty non-traditional career path to doing what I do now. I went to law school, so I paid a lot of money to be educated as a lawyer. I got a law degree and also an LLM, which is a legal master's degree. And I practiced law for only about 1 year. I left the practice of law to do startups. So I worked in technology companies mostly in California and then a little bit in New York. I started my own companies. I worked for other people's companies. I did a lot of different things in that span of time. And very recently, I have started my own real estate company here in New Jersey, real estate investing company. So I do a lot of things with that. I buy homes, I renovate homes, I manage properties that I currently own. I do construction and renovation work. I oversee a company that does that for ourselves and other people. I do property management stuff. So I do a ton of stuff, and I'm at a point in my life where I think that I'm moderately successful in terms of business and in terms of finances, but it took a really long time to get there. And I've learned a lot in the process of going from kind of a normal 9-to-5 day job to where I am now. And I have a lot of friends that are kind of everywhere along that spectrum, to working like 80-hour weeks to doing stuff totally passively. So I want to talk about the 4 things that I learned while doing that, and hopefully they'll be helpful to you and you can use to evaluate if you want to go this route as a career path, and if you do, what to think about or what to learn. So the number one thing for me about being an entrepreneur and being working for yourself is that it's not particularly prestigious. In fact, it's not prestigious at all. A lot of times people will come up to me and I'll tell them what I do. I run my own business, I work for myself, and they'll say, wow, like that's awesome. You're living the dream. You don't have a boss. You don't have to show up to work. You can take a vacation wherever you want. And in some ways, in some literal ways, that's true. I don't have a boss formally, and I can take time off whenever I want. But the reality of working for yourself and running your own business is that the buck stops with you. You are the backstop of your business. So, for example, if you hire somebody to do work for you, if you're relying on somebody to do something else for you and they don't do it, you have to do it. And there's nobody else to blame for it not being done except for you. You can say to that person or whoever you're relying on, like, I'm disappointed that you didn't do it. But at the end of the day, if it has to be done, you have to do it. So examples from my life are, we own investment properties here in the Northeast, and if something goes wrong at one of my investment properties, like the toilet is clogged, and I call a plumber and he doesn't show up, I have to do that. I have to go over to the house and unclog the toilet, and I've done that many times, just because I thought that that's what I needed to do in the time, and that's what made sense in my mind at the time. And I don't regret doing that at all. But at the end of the day, if people say like, wow, you work for yourself, what did you do today? What's going on with your life? It's hard to say, well, honestly, I spent 2 hours unclogging a toilet because I had to do that in order for my property business to succeed. So if you want a job that is really prestigious, where you get to always be doing really cool things and be working for a really dynamic company and feel like you are doing things that are hugely impactful, it may be the case that being an entrepreneur and working for yourself is not for you. I mean, hopefully one day we'll be able to say like, man, I'm really doing cool stuff with my life, and I think I'm getting there a little bit. But I've been doing this now for 5 years, and in that period of time, there's been a lot of cleaning up poop. I mean, literally and metaphysically, figuratively. Not metaphysically, figuratively. I would consider that if you want prestige, it's okay to want that. I mean, I like that. I'm drawn to that. I like when you get to work at a really cool job and put on a fancy suit and say, man, I'm going to a big meeting with an awesome client, or I'm working on really cool issues. That's fine. If that's you, then seek that job out. You're probably not going to find it working for yourself, working as a small business owner or an entrepreneur. The second thing that I wish I knew about being an entrepreneur is that being an entrepreneur and working for yourself is really lonely. And I don't mean lonely in the case that you don't ever talk to people, but what I mean is lonely in the perspective of social validation. So if you've never worked for yourself, you may not understand the value that comes with working with other people. So I know some people out there probably have really terrible bosses and supervisors and people that you hate in the company that you work for. But even something as simple as, say you do an assignment or a project, you turn it in or you finish it or you tell somebody that you're done with it, just the acknowledgement from that person that you're done means a lot. And certainly if they say thank you or you did a great job or I appreciate that or whatever, you may take that for granted and not even think about it. But when you're an entrepreneur and you're working for yourself, there is no one to say that. Maybe you will make a little bit more money or do a little bit better that week or that month because you did that extra project or because you did something really well. But there's no one even to acknowledge to say that you're done. You just move on to the next thing. And what I am saying may not sound important to you, but when you get into a position where you're working for yourself for years and years and years, and you don't have other people, even just to say, I acknowledge that you're done, that you've done, been done with this project, it gets lonely, it gets tiresome. So I've tried to seek out other people to help me, to work with me, other people doing what I'm doing in the tech industry or in the real estate space, just to sort of even brag a little bit and say like, yeah, hey, I just did this thing and I feel great about it. And other people will say, wow, that's cool. I did that thing too, or that's awesome. I'm really glad that you're killing it. So if you really, really value a collaborative co-working experience, being an entrepreneur is going to be difficult, and it's going to be a challenge to seek out and replicate the sort of stuff that you have at your current job. And I wish that I had a better understanding of that before I went into it, because I would have been a lot more purposeful about networking and finding people that are like me involved in the startup or the real estate space when I first started out. The third thing that I wish that I knew about being an entrepreneur before I started is that money is very variable. So the amount of money that you make any day, week, month, year can change drastically and dramatically with how successful your business is. If you're an employee at a company, you probably very rarely have to worry about being paid for the work that you've done. Maybe if you're in a commission-based system, or maybe if you're working in a really small company or a company that's about to go to business, you might have a little bit of a concern. But in the startup world, in the entrepreneurial world, working for yourself world, the amount of money that I make is directly tied to how well my business does. I have employees that work for me, and I will never not pay them. In fact, I will go into debt to pay them for their work. One, because it's illegal to not pay them, and two, because it's just the right thing to do. But I have in the past not paid myself any money. Like I said, I've gone into debt, borrowed money from people just to pay my employees, because like to the first point that I said about the buck stops with you, well, if there's not enough money to go around any given month or week, that comes out of me. That comes out of the money that I'm taking home. And I don't pay myself a normal salary. For tax reasons, it's a lot more advantageous for me not to be paid a W-2 salary in as much as it's possible. But a lot of times that means that I'm not even sure exactly how much I'm really making, because some of the value that I'm building is not in cash money into my bank account, but in equity in the business. So if I do a really good job in my business, the value of my business might increase, but I can't really access that money. I have no way of taking money out of my businesses in any easy way. To some extent, you can do that in real estate. If the value of a house goes up, you can refinance and take money out that way, but that still is kind of a process. And for various reasons, I don't necessarily do that for every house that we own. And there are other aspects of my real estate business where that doesn't make sense. And certainly, in the tech world, for example, there's really no way to do that except for maybe raising money from outside investors, in which case you might dilute yourself. You might lose equity in your own company. So the amount of money that I make on any given day or week can go way up and down. And if you are in a financial situation where you can't afford that, or you're not used to that, being an entrepreneur might be really challenging, and you might need to supplement your income by doing something a lot more regular, like consulting, or maybe working on the side a little bit. But money variability is one of the biggest stressors about being an entrepreneur, being a small business owner that I've encountered. And it's something that I really would encourage you to think about and conceptualize in your life, because it's a way different way of living than working for a steady salary or a steady paycheck like you get from a normal job. The last thing, and what I think might be the most important thing about being an entrepreneur that I didn't know before I started down this path, is the importance of being a domain expert. So what being a domain expert means to me, or at least in this context, is being someone who knows a lot about the problem and the space that you're operating in. When I left my tech job, my experience working in tech startups, to go into real estate full time, we had already owned 4 properties. And I was pretty familiar with the process of buying properties, renovating them, renting them out. Obviously, I wouldn't consider myself, an expert, but I certainly knew a lot more than most people did. The number one thing that I see all the time in people quitting their jobs to go run a startup or to go, operate a small business is that people oftentimes don't know a lot about the space that they're entering, and they're not really willing to learn about it. If you leave your job because it's always been your dream to start a restaurant, but you've never even worked at a restaurant, it's going to be really difficult for you to be successful, just because there's a lot of stuff that you learn by being in that space. Related to this, I think a lot about businesses have processes, right? So a lot of times employees are angry at those processes, like there are, say, managers, or a way to do your accounting, or to maybe reorder inventory, or do sales, or keep track of things, or whatever. Sometimes those processes are really dumb, and I totally agree with people who get upset at them, but other times those processes actually have value. And even just learning what those processes are can be an enormous leg up for you when you're working on your own thing. For example, again, with like running a restaurant, restaurants have all sorts of ways that they do stuff that I don't even know about, and it would be really hard to learn. You can't just call up a restaurant owner or a manager and say like, hey, every day, what do you do every day? They're not going to have a list, because it's just the way that their business operates. So it could be really valuable to spend time learning that before you go into the space, or just learning what the problem is. In my own life, I operated technology companies that solved problems that I had never had, and didn't really know anybody else that, I didn't know that anyone else had this problem except for the domain that I was trying to build it for. So I had to seek out people in that space to say, oh yeah, I want to solve this problem. I don't know anything about it. Can you tell me, about it? That's really, really challenging. Whereas if I had a problem personally that I had experienced and wanted to solve it, that's a lot easier, because then I am the expert. I know the problem. I have experienced it myself. I experience it maybe every day. Real estate is great for that, because I live in a place, so does everybody. So I kind of know the basics about what does it take to live comfortably in an apartment, or in a house, or in a nice neighborhood, or whatever. If you're not familiar with the problem that you're solving or the space that you're entering, I really, 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 really encourage you to spend time learning about it before you go into that space. You might learn something about it that you don't like, that's not attractive to you anymore. Or you might learn something that's going to totally change your trajectory as an entrepreneur and save you tons and tons and tons and tons of time. So I would super encourage anyone seeking to be an entrepreneur to think very, very, very closely about becoming a domain expert in the domain, in the space, in the problem space that you are seeking to solve. All of this is to say, I love what I do. I can't imagine going back to a normal 9-to-5 salary job at this point in my life, and I encourage people to pursue their passions and their dreams. And if it's running your own business and working for yourself, you should absolutely do it. But think a little bit about some of the things that I've said, about stuff that I wish that I knew. I love talking about entrepreneurship, small business, working for yourself. I do that all the time. And if you'd like more of these videos, please let me know with comments, ideas about what I've said, other problems that you've encountered. Please subscribe to see more of these videos, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take care.